David Bowie has died, and I want to make a Christian response to that. And why I, of all people, want to make that response is because I grew up down the road from where David Bowie went to school, and the Burnt Ash primary school that he did his primary education in was just down the road from Cooper's Lane, where I did my primary schooling. And the place he got married there in Bromley, I walked past that. He was, if you like, one of our boys, one of our guys from South London, who made it, of course, a lot smarter than most of us and went far further than the vast majority of us. But what was it about his music that was so attractive? Now, he was not a Christian. David wasn't a Christian, and I'm not trying to pretend he was. But all the same, there was something that attracted a lot of people to his music, including Christians. I think it was because he, as it were, took the basic thoughts out of our minds, not the words out of our mouths, because he put those thoughts into his words in a very powerful way, far more powerful than maybe we can verbalize our own thoughts. And he portrayed the zany, sort of pointless, weird, odd nature of life, and tried in his own way to transcend it. Talking about Ziggy Stardust and the man who fell down from the sky and all this kind of stuff. And that desire to transcend the 9-to-5 existence that most people have was somehow attractive to us. And that persona of trying to get out of this humdrum human existence, and okay, he used drugs and so forth, but all the same, for those of us who don't use drugs, all the same, we could sort of pick the idea that, yeah, this is a humdrum existence, and I want to be involved in something far greater than this, something that far transcends human experience. Problem is with listening to any music, no matter how powerfully it manages to express those senses that I just touched on, all the same, the music comes to an end, the band stops playing. The high has to end, and it's Monday morning, and there's kids to look after, and there's responsibilities of one sort or another to attend to, and we've got to get back on with life as it is. And so what did the transcendental moment, no matter how long the moment was, whether it was 10 minutes of listening to David, or whether it was a longer reverie in whatever way, okay, so what did that achieve? Yes, we were in touch with our basic desire to comment upon the inanity of life and to rise above that in some way, but then where does it all end up? And that is where I would say that there is an answer, there is, in essence, an answer to all that in true Bible-based Christianity. That, yes, there is this inexplicable element. There is this bizarreness, inane sort of thing in life, and that desire to transcend, that desire to be something, to be part of something that is above human. And that is the message, I would say, of true Christianity. Now, David was not a Christian, and I wouldn't mind guessing that, like most people, like many people, he was put off religion by religion. But the God that is behind religion, and in the case of Christianity, the Jesus Christ who is behind Christianity, is for real. And all the religion, the denominations, and so forth that put people off, well, it's for us to see through that to the essence, for us to see the eye of the tiger. Now, I was very touched to discover that David's last song was called Lazarus. And he made one of his very powerful videos of him, basically, David, lying in bed in a hospital ward covered in bandages, like the Lazarus in the New Testament, the dead Lazarus who was resurrected by the Lord Jesus. And in the video, you can see David starting to levitate a bit above the hospital bed, and then to, as it were, be crucified. There's images of David with arms outstretched in a crucified position, and then apparently ascending. So in the very end, after the long career that he had, exploring all sorts of avenues and all sorts of ways of expression, he identified in some way, or sought to identify, with the message of the crucified Jesus, resurrection and ascension. I'm not saying that that makes him a Christian, not at all. I'm just observing. And I'm observing that there is, as it were, a gap, a hole in the human mind, in the human heart, in the human desire to transcend, which I submit is fitted perfectly, a perfect fit by the Lord Jesus Christ. And really and truly, we can make that identity, that act of identity with the crucified, risen and ascended Lord Jesus Christ by the act of baptism into him. The Apostle Paul in the Bible talks about being co-crucified with Christ, and that is the essence of our lives. And thereby his life, his resurrection becomes ours. And that is our connection with that which is transcendental, if you want to use that term, with that which is so much greater and more fantastic than this mortal life, which is so bizarre and is so inane, as David pointed out so well and expressed so finely and so compellingly in his lyrics and in his music. So then, it struck me as I reviewed that movie and those images of David towards the end of his life there, showing himself in a crucified position, identifying with the resurrected, bandaged Lazarus. It reminded me of a trip I made to the concentration camp at Auschwitz in southern Poland. And when I was there was a display, an exhibition about art that had been done in some form by the people who had been killed there. As you know, many of those people, not all, but many of them were Jewish people and were not actually Christians. And I was struck by the number of crucifixes, of depictions of the cross of Jesus Christ, which were there on display, which had been done by prisoners. For example, in the waiting room, where the Jews were herded before they were put into the gas chambers, the room was made of wood. And people with their fingernails had chiselled with fingernails in the wood little pictures of the crucified Christ. So there again, in essence, you have the same thing playing out as you saw with David just before his passing. Thinking clearly, his thoughts were with somehow the idea of a connection with a crucified Christ, resurrection and so forth. I'm not saying that makes him a Christian, and I'm not, because I don't think he would at all appreciate having been called a Christian. That also doesn't make the thousands, tens of thousands of Jewish people who died in Auschwitz, it doesn't make them Christians either. I'm observing, though, that there is this thought, there is this hole in our thinking that is fitted somehow by the Lord Jesus Christ. There's a verse in the Bible in Ecclesiastes that says, "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come." In other words, don't start going into all this stuff when it's too late. Remember your Creator now. My suggestion to you is to get a free Bible that we're offering with commentary and to read the actual first source for yourself. And finally, to make that identity with the Lord Jesus Christ, to be co-crucified with him through baptism, through a life in him, so that really we'll be able to achieve what David touched on so powerfully in his music, in his lyrics, in his videos, the transcending of this very, very limited mortal life that we have into the nature of God himself through the work of his Son. Thank you.